Okay, I'm going to start maybe, and if we need to skip Rhina, we'll get back to her later. Okay?
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for signing in. Thank you. Alex is making sure we're all connected. Welcome, all poets and poetry friends and lovers and family. And thank you for sharing our reading of our newly published, here it is, the Powow River Poets Anthology Truth. And thank you, Alex Pepple, founder and editor-in-chief of Able Muse Press, for publishing this for us. Thank you. The Powows are honored to have been published by Able Muse, and we're doubly honored to read today. I'm Paulette Demers Turco, editor of the anthology. Thank you, Alex, for inviting me to serve as program host. And in case you haven't noticed, because this happened at about 1:12 this afternoon, all who were registered received an email from Alex with a program for today's event, and it lists the readers, the poets, the page numbers, and along with one-sentence bios of each of the readers. You don't really need to look at it to know what's going on in the program, but if you would like to look at it, it's there for you. I'll begin by giving you a brief overview of how the anthology came to be. Then our 7 readers will read from the anthology. Our readers are, and maybe you can make a little noise so that and wave when I say your name so that those in the audience can see you. So our readers are Michael Cantor.
Yay, hooray.
Thank you. Rhina P. Espaillat.
Here I am, the late
Hey.
Grand entrance, Rhina.
MFrost Delaney. Make a noise, make a noise.
Hi.
Jean L. Kreiling.
Over here.
Okay. Alfred Nicol.
Hi.
Hi. Anton Yakovlev.
Present here.
Yay. And myself.
Yay.
Thank you. I'll be the closing reader, and then we'll have a short question and answer session. So feel free to place comments, and please do place comments and questions in the chat room anytime during the program. This reading is memorable for us in that it is the first where the 4 members of the anthology's editorial board, I'll be reading together. And also, thanks to Alex for giving us an hour for reading, all contributors to the anthology. Yay! all who contributed to the anthology will have a poem read today. So why now? Why 14 years after the first anthology do the Powows write an anthology? Well, our co-founder, Rhina P. Espaillat, Alfred Nicol, editor of the first anthology, and Jean L. Kreiling, a long time and very accomplished powwow, saw 2 timely reasons in 2019. First, David Berman, a long time and much loved and respected powwow, had passed away in 2017, and they felt that dedicating an anthology to him would be a fitting way to honor him. Second, David Davis, another much loved powwow, who joined after the first anthology was completed, was battling end-stage cancer. Time was short for him to be able to contribute to the anthology. The decision was made. I am honored that I was asked to serve as editor. The powwows were on board. In 3 weeks' time, they had submitted 260 pages of their best poems. And 3 weeks later, the readers had selected the best of those best for the 132 pages of poetry. The next stage, we are grateful to Leslie Mansour. If she is here, say a little hello. and Catherine Chandler, who's here. Say hello. So Leslie Mansour wrote a fabulous introduction. Catherine Chandler and Dick Davis gave very complimentary back cover reviews, and we are very grateful. And we are so grateful to Alex Pepple for agreeing to publish and to maintain our hoped for tight timeline, even when COVID arrived in the US. We have benefited from Zoom to bring our work to audiences by we placed our link in chat rooms for purchasing the anthology, as we've done today. But as everyone else here who writes, we are looking forward to book tables. So let's begin our reading. I will introduce Rhina, our first reader. Dominican-born Rhina P. Espaillat is a bilingual poet, short story writer, essayist, and translator who has founded successful workshops, published 17 books, teaches creative writing to both adults and adolescents, and is a frequent speaker at schools and other cultural events, and much more we all know. Rhina, are you ready?
I am.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
I
you.
can't see Rhina. I can't see her.
Once she
Right
starts
there.
talking, you will see.
Okay.
Big as life and twice as ugly.
Oh,
It's my honor today, as it has been several times now, to read David Berman's poem as an introduction to our reading. It's called The Effect of Hearing the Sublime, and it's perfect, Berman, because he is pretending to be a Ulysses here, and he is telling his men on board, all right, go ahead, go toward the music, go toward what is most valuable here, and even if we don't make it home, it doesn't matter. But of course, he had the wisdom beforehand to have himself tied up to the mast. So they make it, but he knew what to expect. The effect of hearing the sublime. Odysseus, who heard the sirens sing, was not enraptured by another thing he heard from human lips, fools muttering and golden sounds that proved the flutist's skill, which other men said gave their hearts a thrill, to him were equally dislikable. He knew that he would never hear again the sounds he would have died for, had his men been able to hear what he said to them, which was, steer toward the music, though it means we shall not land upon familiar scenes, nor want to, once this music intervenes. So thank you, David. Here is just stopping. The God in whom I once believed showed up last night beside my bed and sat down at the foot. I said, what a surprise, Lord. I'm relieved that you're not dead. He shrugged. I have good days and bad. When I was Zeus, what clout I had. These days, it's all about complaints. What thanks we get, it makes me mad. Go to the saints for curing stuff and granting things, as if creation were a mall where every merchant has his stall. And arguments, you're made of strings, you're a big ball of motion, you're a state of mind, you're mathematics, on and on. Now I could see his face was lined like that of some old mafia don whose turf is gone. And he looked tired, which truth to tell he'd have to be by now, and bored, unlike his counterpart in hell, and only fitfully adored. He wasn't well. I told him, look, you need some sleep. Lie down. I'll wake you when it's day, and make you breakfast if you stay. But mumbling promises to keep, he paled away. When light returned, I knew I'd done less than I should. But then he'd run too soon to hear what or how much I might have said. Thanks for the sun, or stay in touch. So after a little bit of trouble with the Lord. Here is one by Andrew Silvazzi, one of our younger members. I am so proud of the young people in this group. They're wonderful. Beyond all change. The earth is beautiful beyond all change. I think it's the all that really gets me. Naked trees in a milk-white field of eagles, picture still on mountains that cradle the jaws of late leviathans. These are beautiful beyond all change. And I can even see the deep sea beauty of the anglerfish, whose take on love makes true the human lie. Flesh of our flesh, blood of our blood. But is the poet right about all change? There will come a time when the bloated sun will drink the rocks and breathe the oceans, when we sit with crows in flaming trees. Will we walk hand in hand, admiring the mountains that melt around us? And this is a poem for our time, because we're playing games with the earth and the earth doesn't want to play. So, and here is Deborah Warren with a poem unlike anybody else's because she is unique. This one is called Down to Earth. In the field, the coyote yips imminent danger. The dog in the kitchen rumbles a basso growl. The field sends back a shrill elastic baying. The kitchen gives a soprano howl. These two aren't discussing climate change, war, flu, layoffs. In this dialogue, a well-informed coyote's not relaying to a pessimistic dog grounds for worry. National cases of mange, the mountain lion population swelling, a cougar sighting 15 miles away. Only a future close enough to smell. And if that isn't a Deborah Warren ending, I don't know what is. She always manages to come in at the end with something from out of left field. I adore her work. Well, I guess that's it right now. Oh, do you want the, no, that's it for us. That's it for me.
Okay, we'll come back to you then. Okay. So would you like to introduce Michael Cantor?
Oh, Michael Cantor, my goodness, he's one of the oldest, one of the first early powwows, and I'm so glad to have him back. The Southwest stole him, and I am very angry with the Southwest for that. It's wonderful to have you back. Where are you? He knows the whole world. He's been to Japan. He's been all over Latin America. He's been all over everywhere. He has brought back ideas for poems, languages for poems. Every other word is Japanese or something else equally exciting. So it's wonderful to have you back.
Thank you, Rhina.
Okay. I'll start with two of my villanelles. And like most of my poetry, these are based very much in my own life, and then I lie a bit to make it more interesting. To an old friend who died young. The first time was a game, we all agreed. A cry for help, of course, but nothing more. And then you dove out over 87th Street. The maid was due at noon. You gambled she'd smell gas as soon as she came near the door. That first time was a game. We all agreed you missed your ex, you shrugged, you blamed the weed, and promised us there would be no encore. But then you broke apart on 87th Street that Sunday morning. What voices did you heed? What madness crept up to the 14th floor? The first time was a game, we all agreed. We spoke of how you always seemed to need attention, called up stunts you'd staged before, and then you sailed out over 87th Street and gave the game an ending guaranteed to make it clear who kept the final score. The first time was a game, we all agreed, and then you plummeted to 87th Street. Okay, the second one for Harry, who had 3 passports. Oh. I knew a man who had a man who knew a man inside the ministry. He said his man was just the man to see you through whatever difficulties might ensue in sorting out the living from the dead. I knew a man who knew back then what Harry really knew, or who he'd ever helped, or who got screwed instead. He was the kind of man who'd see you through his pale blue eyes and sense at once what you most feared and what you'd pay to ease your dread. To meet a man who knew the man who knew. I'm just a businessman, he'd say, a Jew without a tribe, and raise his gleaming head. But you can trust my man to see you through. When others raged, he quietly withdrew, and we all left, but Harry never fled. He knew a man who knew a man who knew the man who was the man to see you through. Okay, now some by my powwow buddies. The first is by Robert Crawford. Bob has a great deal of interest. One is military history, and this poem follows that interest and is based on a true incident in Norway in 1944. A passenger. You do not know what lies within the hold. Calmly, you walk the deck, while down below, click clocks tick toward their appointed hour. You go about your business, unaware of bold decisions, grand designs. Obey when told to show your papers. Soon, plastique will blow apart the ferry's bow. You'll never know. You simply note the night has gotten cold. But if you knew what this trip held in store, would you still see the beauty of the moon? The rising haloed moon that just now broaches a mountain pass above the darkened shore and full, resplendent, sends a white harpoon across the water as your hour approaches. Next, another sonnet, this one by Deborah Warren. Everything that Rhina said about Deborah, I can only repeat. What I love about this poem, though, is how the language changes in the last 3 lines. The Ballad of the 8-Week Kittens. With such abandon, buoyant wide jetés around the kitchen furniture and air, possessed by arcs of fur and ricochets, plunges and cabriolets. They're everywhere. Dance, kittens. Take the table, flying, jump drunk. You have caused a pirouette, more than you dream of. Barns and meadows lying outside, things you don't imagine yet. Hurl yourselves in knots across the floor, leaps, demented onto the shots. Ignore the galaxies beyond the kitchen door. And when you tumble to it that there's more than this, more than the little world you know, take me out there with you when you go. Okay, final one is by Midge Goldberg. And my note on this one, I think Midge is listening in. Midge, I like this one because it's the kind of poem I might have written. Telling. And it's another villanelle. Telling. Each time it was retold, the story grew. I tried to find the truth, to no avail. What really happened, no one ever knew. My mother's version never gave a clue of her first husband. No mention of betrayal every time it was retold. The story grew, however, when she died. He'd been untrue and drank, her friend said, made the marriage fail. And that's what really happened. No one knew she'd kept some photos that she'd cut in two. The hand gently holding her waist was male, telling a different story. So I grew curious and called him. She'd have me do her braid each night. So this one detail happened at least to him. I finally knew I couldn't know. The different points of view, you can't remove the teller from the tale. Each time it was retold, the story grew. What really happened, no one ever knew. Thank you. MFrost Delaney, I finally got it all out, who doesn't tell us much about her in a little bio, but she's recently published a couple of books, and I'm very proud and pleased with the way Marianne has come along in the Powows.
Thank you, Michael. The first poem I'm going to read is one of my own. It's called Silence, and the epigraph is from a poem by Rhina Espaillat called Observation. The epigraph is, a spoon, a glove, a clock at its dull task seem ominously edged, as if they knew secrets they might tell if you could ask. Silence. What secrets hide in dishes in the hutch, or in the window coverings, the shades pulled down? And what about those hardwood floors? If they could whisper tales, would they tell much? The stories they could weave into the braids of time, the anguish cloaked behind closed doors, the light that's blocked so no one really sees, the tiptoes felt so someone can't be heard. They had been too unhappy, no, scared wives, abandoning all praying on their knees, then passing on before there came a third. She took to hiding keys and all the knives and never wore her shoes when in the house. The nights he raged through cups and bowls and plates, she cowered in a corner, held back tears, and wondered why she stayed with such a spouse and worried if she'd meet the past wives' fates. Like them, she was a prisoner of her fears. But dishes, shades, and floors will never tell. They know intimidation all too well. The next poem I'm going to read is by Anne Mulvey, who is an original Powow group member, as I recall. She's been with us for many, many years. She's a professor emeritus at UMass Lowell. This poem is called Talking Back. At first, there was just one of you. I couldn't have imagined two. But then you said you had a son. He was the only holy one. By the time I had reached the age of reason, you'd convinced me it was treason to doubt the Holy Trinity. So then I had three gods I could not see. I wish I hadn't been so slow. I wish I had decided long ago to listen to just one instead of three, hearing less from you and more from me. Last poem I'm going to read is by Mary Beth Ruhl Larson. Mary Beth has been very active outside the country for quite a long time. She's won a poetry award in Ireland and has been awarded 2 international fellowships. She's been with the Powows for about 5 years. West 2nd Street, Oswego, 1986. I remember the walk more than the movie. Your birthday, your choice, you said. And it was a luxury to lock our front door behind us, follow the sidewalk downtown. We stopped first at the river, watched the moon backstitch its silver through the surface, while the carp those golden outsiders never intending to stay, rolled beneath, then rose, open-mouthed, gaping like the family we'd left behind. Every step past the flickering marquee, its dim bulbs framing pretty in pink, was ghostlit and creeping to the farthest, darkest seats. We whispered all through the movie. How easily carp learn moving water. How salt lingers on the tongue, waiting for relief. After the film arced at the prom dress, all polka dots and bare shoulders, a momentary spark before it drifted away, we walked home, passing a shadow of narcissus in a stranger's garden. The moon hid this time, fooled by a mask of clouds. And with your arms around me, we paused again at the river, listened as wave after small wave spilled its troubles on the shore, chanting, I won't let go, I won't let go, I won't let go. Thank you. Now I would like to introduce Jean Kreiling, who is a professor of music at Bridgewater State University. She has 2 full-length poetry collections. She's won a number of awards and contests and the such. She's just out there everywhere. I can't remember how many years you've been with us, Jean, but she's been with us for a while and she's been really helping keep us on the straight and narrow. Take it away, Jean.
Thank you, Marianne. I'll begin with a sonnet of my own. It's called No Escape. He guns the engine just to hear it roar, a barrel-chested, thunderous last word. He'd slammed out of the house, but that screen door had barely slapped. Now, sure that he's been heard, he takes off, elbow out the window, aping his father's driving posture, unaware that so much of what he thinks he's escaping has hitched a ride, has filled his tires with air, has fueled the bellowing of his V8, and now glares in his windshield. Peering past blind rage, he sees enough to navigate around the potholes and goes nowhere fast. His left forearm, like that of his old man, will always wear a slightly darker tan. And here's a more lighthearted look at a different sort of family relationship. In reading this, I take on the persona of a married man. This is a villanelle by A.M. Juster titled Backup Plan. If I were single once again, not that I'm really planning, dear. Like other men, I bag the low-fat regimen and live on burgers, ribs, and beer. If I were single, once again, there would be Fritos in the den and napkin rings would disappear. I would indulge like other men, not shave or floss and sleep past 10. My feelings could be insincere. If I were single once again and free to leave the seat up when my heart desired, it is clear I would indulge like other men. Although I would be helpless then and yearn for your return, I fear. If I were single once again, I would indulge like other men. In this next poem, Tony Treadway also focuses on the marital relationship, and there's a bit of wit here too. Tony Treadway, You in Socks. The shine on red oak stairs and you in socks. That's how I polish them, you say and laugh. So down you go with water in a glass. Look, Ma, no hands. to tumble on your ass. Watch out, my love. Do not upend your life with urgent trips to doctors and PT. Please understand, I'm sorry, but it's me, with worries brimming to the nth degree. I have to let my would-be mother out. Maternal energies, when set aside, can turn into hovering by a spouse who wants to tend her loved ones, lest they fall into swift depths or be consumed by all the dragons underneath her childless bed. And finally, the speaker in this poem by Barbara Lydecker Crane assesses her own shortcomings with an admirably light touch. My fault lines. Clumsy, bumbled in, inept. Heedless, tumbled when she leapt. Presumptive, trod and overstepped. Lazy's late, she overslept. Ditherer will make you wait. Pessimist is blaming fate. Carper's sharpened words berate. Nervous, in another state. Smarty Pants holds up her hand. Loudmouth always beats the band. Bossy barks a rough command. Prideful thinks she's simply grand. Bitsy's world is all her own. Absent-minded lost her phone. Nosy's snout is overblown. Lusty needs a chaperone. Interrupters barging in. Procrastinator won't begin. Martyr takes it on the chin. Blameless hides behind her grin. Thank you. Our next reader is Alfred Nicol, whose most recent publication is the chapbook Brief Accident of Light, Poems of Newburyport, a collaboration with Rhina Espaillat, published in 2019 by Kelsey Books. Take it away, Alfred.
Thank you, Jean. And thank you, Paulette. And thank you, Alex. Thank you most of all. I chose the first poem I'll read today because I anticipated that there'd be a lot of poets in the audience. And my poem puts this business of writing poetry in perspective. It's called Nuts. I come in contact with a lot of nuts. Poetry readings, church, the library, they're always there. Lost souls end up in ruts like everybody else. I often see a man whose armload of biographies that codger won't live long enough to read, fumbling for change to pay his past due fees on other lives. How many does he need? He's lost his place in his own story. One thin volume more than he can carry home. Library quiet, fording the Echeron. And then there are the ruts that lead to Rome. The crazies go to mass on Sunday too. I've noticed torture going on. One fellow brings the Inquisition to his pew. His hair is matted, black. His eyes are yellow. No sign of peace. He won't let you come near. His forehead's beaded from the fires he's fanning. Bloodstorms, paroxysms of guilt. I fear his awful sin may be the one he's planning. And poetry. Perhaps I shouldn't say. The open mic's a magnet for the daft. The trembling hand, the mangled, stiff cliche, time is a river. The podium's a raft, the poet's grip, riding the floodwaters. Let the four winds blow. The struggling poets row against the swells, bedraggled, cold, and wet. Forgive them, for they know not where they go. Well, that poem mentions three kinds of nuts: readers, believers, and poets. I guess I'm a mixed nut. I belong to all three groups, and I'm glad of it. It's good company. And let's admit it, the best thing about our group, the Powow River Poets, is the opportunity it gives us to share each other's company. I've made lifelong friends with poets I've met at our workshops. Today, I'll read poems by two of my closest poet friends. The first is by Deborah Warren, titled Mole. You're hearing a lot from Deborah today, but that's a good thing. That's a good thing to hear. So this one is called Mole. Earth is his occupation, and the mole works the turf in his native breaststroke, swimming hallways into the sod, a geonaut supreme and connoisseur of worms. I've heard him breaking roots an inch beneath my soul, and seen how the subterranean specialist carves out for himself a single, simple role. I envy the expertise he brings to bear on dirt, the narrow office he was given. As for me, my habitat is thought, where I grope and sweat and scrabble out a living forced to prove up here in a windy lair as invisible as the moles, that there exists an animal who can dig a hole in air. And then I'm going to end with a poem by my pal Bob Crawford, and this one's called Grappling Hook. Grappling Hook by Robert W. Crawford. That summer I was 8 or 9, up early to help my grandpa coming back at dawn. I saw it on the transom of the boat, an anchor-sized steel gray and three-pronged hook, still wet and covered with the lake debris. What's that? He hesitated, trying to decide if I was old enough to handle it. It's called a grappling hook. You drag it on the bottom of the lake to find a body. We needed it to find a boy who drowned. I saw exactly as it happened, like a movie where they had a light that wasn't there in the real world. The boy, his eyes closed, full of water, out of air, rocking in the silt. The grappling hook came out of the inky brown and with a lurch hit him and his eyes opened. Did he reach out and grab the line? I'd seen a woman at the shore lunge for a float a lifeguard tossed to save her from the waves. No, he was dead already. He looked at me, his face a mix of anger and confusion. Some Browns Mill teenagers were camping out. And then the stupid, silly boy went swimming right after dinner toward the middle island. And halfway out, I guess he got a cramp. To think, just to show off for a girl. All right, and so our next reader is Anton Yakovlev, and he's the most cosmopolitan, international, and innovative poet we've got. And we're very lucky that he stuck with us even though he moved off to the big city. He's in New York now, he's in New York City. But he's absolutely, he attends more workshops than I do. So he's really with us, and we're lucky, and you'll be lucky to listen to him. He's next.
Thank you, Alfred, and thank you, Paulette and Alex, of course, and thank you for everyone who's here and the fellow readers and everyone who's here. So I'll start with a poem called Ask Anyone. Ask anyone who lived in Soviet times. It was at night that people went away. Faint blood in basements, vague rumors of crimes. Ask anyone who lived in Soviet times. Quiet black Volgas gliding past stop signs, limbs sticking out of trucks at break of day. Ask anyone who lived in Soviet times. It was at night that people went away. Now switching gears to this next poem, which is in the voice of Katharine Hepburn addressing Spencer Tracy 20 years after he passed away. Hepburn to Tracy, a dismantling. I say goodbye to lamps, to figurines, to the porch door you never left unlocked, to your insomnia and to your dreams, and to the horsehair chair in which you rocked. For 27 years, you lived with me in this small house, and it's been 20 more since you got up that night to drink your tea and fell face forward on the kitchen floor. I'll miss our windows and our nothing view. You know, dear Spence, I've changed my laugh for you. Not that I hear it much, now you're away. I'll keep your sense of humor, your ennui, your books, your gate-legged table, and I pray, that quiet way you sometimes looked at me. This next poem is by Wendy Canella. It is called Message from a Dead Pearl Diver, based on the sculpture by Benjamin Paul Eggers, The Dead Pearl Diver, from 1858. Don't get so close. Quit staring. Haven't you ever seen a dead man go stone? Haven't you studied the neoclassical period? I'm just like every other frozen numb skull, burying my torso, arcing my back, penny smooth. Can't you read? The sign says, do not touch. Anyway, I can't give you what you want. You're starting to remind me of something. Your little blue purse snapped shut under your arm. I'm so tired of my own dramatic gestures. Don't you see the museum guard over there? Please step back from the mesh net of my despair. Leave my messages unopened. Oysters I dug out of the muck. Don't tell me I did it for money. I was flooded by the body's many doors. I ended each day with a mouthful of sand, pearls, sand. Wendy Canella. Next poem by John Alice Wood Kimball. Rhymes from a River, after Christian Wyman. A stream so blue it mimics the sky, at dawn, a golden scar, a chain of mallards drifting by, a chain of geese afar, a willow shading bloated spill above a quick minx wake, a tethered rowboat, not quite still, a glint of water snake, a tree crown shading every light, a red root sucking mud, a sap vein coursing its full height above the river flood, a human touch, the dog protrudes, an angle thrusting out, a wooden stage for solitude, a span to nurture doubt. John Alice Wood Kimball. By James Nigerian, The Annunciation. She expected nothing like it, but pottered in her average day, just like us. Put some things away, scrubbed, tidied, lay about a bit, washed, glimpsed in a mirror, and then, artists have yielded the scene. Prodigal drapery on a lean, hallowed angel, pristine, even stuck gigantic lilies in his hand that painted Mary looking pale, and at the floor the hail before Mary failing to land anywhere. Or they make the angel a glint of light or wing, Still, something is missing. What was she feeling? An ache? Fear? Fullness? Emotion toward? More than this. She took the braid of flesh and blade and spoke back, unafraid. I am the handmaid of the Lord. James Nigerian. And finally, by Jose Edmundo Camporez, Instructions to Travelers from the Third World. Before you cross the border, you must learn how to use your passport, the sine qua non of any voyage. Guard it as your life. You must not lose your passport. Your photo may adorn it, but it really is the property of your crumbling republic, as you are. It is a crime to alter or reproduce your passport. Peculiar to you as your shadow, your fingerprint, your double helix, it is neither carte blanche nor diary of hopes. Don't abuse your passport. You dream of glimpsing snow, cathedrals, fist-sized diamonds plundered from your land. First, you must queue for hours in the sun. Wait for the consul to peruse your passport. When he slams down his crimson stamp like a gavel, and you walk home, dusting off your shame, how easy it will be to accuse your passport. But it is guiltless, as a torture route that causes you to trip and break a bone. Blame instead your fellow terrorists and refugees and excuse your passport. Think you can sneak by without a visa, feign ignorance, charm the immigration officer with your strange locution? Your scheme will boomerang once he views your passport. Your name, the theorems you've proved, your cancer cure are of no consequence. Its pages, blighted fields. Your passport is your world. You cannot choose your passport. Jose Edmundo Camporez. And it's now my honor and pleasure to introduce the fearless leader of the anthology and of this reading, Paulette Demers Turco, the editor of the anthology, who joined the Powows in 2018, the same year that her first chapbook, In Silence, was published by Finishing Line Press. Please welcome Paulette. Welcome back, Paulette.
Thank you so much, Anton. I'm going to read 5 poems, and I'm going to ask Rhina to read the last poem, The Waterfall. Okay, Rhina? Okay, at the end. That will be our last poem, unless Rhina would like to read another one before that. My first poem is a poem of mine, a villanelle, page 118, for my mother. Hours arrested. Epigraph 6 months later. Again, Mom turns Dad's band on her right hand and eyes the one with whom she shares the room. Mom whispers, frowns, but I don't understand. How long has Dad been gone? Her days unplanned. He'd be beside her, carving. Memories loom again. She turns his band on her right hand. Did I go to his wake? Can she withstand repeated jolts? She broods. He was my groom. Then whispers, frowns. But I don't understand. She nods. I moved here once I lost him. And her loss of time, his absence, fill the room. She turns Dad's wedding band on her right hand and glances at Dad's photo on the stand beside her, near the jasmine, lush with bloom. She whispers, frowns, but I don't understand. The Valentine she made for him by hand fades on her memo board. The man for whom she turns the band again, on her right hand, is gone. She frowns. but I don't understand. My next poem, thank you, by Don Kimball is a triolet on page 62, honoring life and loss. Burial for a stray, for BB. 2 dogs and a cat who knew you best came by and sat as I dug a hole. Azaleas bloomed there where you rest. 2 dogs, a cat who knew you best keep vigil here. At whose behest? Torn ear, 1 eye, life takes its toll. 2 dogs and a cat who knew you best came by and sat. I dug the hole. Thank you. My third poem, by Kyle Potvin, page 98, is of a simple act of love and more. Love note. Unseen, she tucked it in her lover's coat while he was busy packing up his clothes and laptop for a week away. The note might be discovered on the plane. Who knows? Or still, much later in a hotel room, before he settles into bed alone. Alone. She feels a sudden sense of doom about things left undone and things unknown. What if the letter falls out like a glove, lost in a crowded airport ticket line, then stamped by ruthless heels that can't feel love? She wishes she had sent a clearer sign, concealed her words where only he could see, tattooed beneath his skin indelibly. This next poem, Owen Gray's Love and Loss poem, challenges boundaries. My memory of you still rests upon my shoulder, whispering sweet tales and lies that sound so much like truths. I agonize as day slowly becomes hard night, then dawn, then restlessly I find myself redrawn in stark relief to see the lightened skies. Another day without you slowly dies. But I cannot accept that you are gone. Despite myself, I feed this little you, longing for some peace to comfort me. I hope you'll change your mind, but know your heart will not be satisfied, could not make do with us. There's so much world for you to see. Your path through life is yours, alone, to chart. Thank you. Meredith Bergman's opening sonnet on page 3 carries the reader through a moment of kindness and the complexities of rescue. The bird in the bathroom, for my son Daniel. All gray. The bird was small, but not a sparrow. He huddled underneath the pipes. He'd been alone for days, since those who'd let him in had fled the flooded house, but locked each window. Crouched there, uncoaxable as chronic sorrow. Our bird was silent, and his eye looked dim. I dropped a worn-out dishcloth over him and shook the bundle out into the meadow. He hopped away, and someday you must follow. From little rooms of therapy, begin to ask yourself what none of us can ask you. One always dreams of more dramatic rescue, like ours from flood. You soar through lashing wind. The chopper sets you gently on your shadow. Thank you. So, Rhina, we give the floor back to you.
I feel privileged and very, very lucky to have begun this reading with one of the people who is gone but not gone. and to end it with another one. There are people who manage to stay around forever. And this David Davis is one of them, like David Berman. Because just as David Berman reminded us always of excellence, of the right way to do things, of the right word, exactly the right word, when most of us would settle for the next one. Well, this fellow was in love with joy, and he brought joy everywhere he went. Everything he wrote had the taste of joy in it, and I don't know about the rest of you, but he's with me all the time. This is called The Waterfall, and it's another poem in which he discovers something beautiful that most of us would miss. I left my cubicle and those gray things, the bugs we couldn't fix, the deadlines passed, to drive 4 hours and camp near Poncha Springs, well off a road I always took too fast. Next day I ate and left at dawn to hike a trail I chose at random from a map. Passed once too often by a mountain bike, I left the path and climbed the edge. A gap opened on a way down to a stream. I followed it, and then I heard a sound. Aspen dappled, moving in a dream, I ducked beneath limbs, made my way around the powdered trunks and fairy trumpet stalks. The cinquefoil and columbine and rose toward a booming coming from the rocks. A final wall of briars tore my clothes. I broke through to a pool beneath the falls, a hidden place that no one ever knew. Reverberating thunder filled the walls of rock that hid the waterfall from view. I do not know how long I stood in mist and sound and memory, with my mind caught on something that somehow my life had missed, with no awareness of the loss, the thought that earthbound streams can leap into the air, turn into rainbows falling like bouquets, in roaring coruscated land, prepare for normal life, grow calm, and flow away. Which is exactly what he did. He flowed away quietly and beautifully. Thank you very much. And I'd like to say again, I'm always struck every time I read with this group about the sheer good luck that I've had all my life, because this group fell into my lap, and I love all of you like family, because you are family, and you have taught me so much that I can never pay you back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rhina. Can we all unmute and just give a huge applause? A real everyone.
Bravo!
Yay, fantastic.
Hey.
Bravo!
Terrific. Terrific.
It's very moving. Very.
Thank you. Thank you.
Here's Lee.
Beautiful.
So we would love to answer your questions or respond to you. There are so many comments in the chat room. Thank you for all those. It's wonderful to read them. I don't see any questions in there. And if you don't have a question for me or any one of us, you can talk, you can unmute and say your question if you don't want to put it in the chat room. And if you don't ask me a question, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask the audience a question. Well, thank you for all your wonderful comments. I'm wondering if anyone in the audience could say whether this inspires them to write an anthology, to get their group together and write an anthology. I'll tell you, if our group is, we're just friends, wonderful friends, but I really think being a new member in 2018 really brought us together even more.
I want to say something. What I am inspired to do is engage in crime. Yes, because after listening to all these poems by the Powows, I feel like stealing everything. I really would like to have Alfred Nicol's warmth, the human warmth that comes through every word he writes. The wit, the sheer crazy wit of Elizabeth Warren, Deborah Warren, And all these traits that are individual to these people. Tony, who is always worried about somebody she has to save from a terrible fate.
Mm.
And all of that comes through in the poetry, not because we put it there on purpose, but because poetry itself does that. It defines who we are and what we do and how we think. And I think it's just wonderful. So one of these days I'm going to be in jail.
Now, Paulette, we really did, if in the chat room, we really were asked quite a challenging question.
Yes.
Kathleen Desolé asked, what is form and what not? I just reading the question. I'm not.
Yes, I just spotted that. Do you have the answer, Alfred?
No, I am. You could go on for days on that one. You could give the long answer or the short one.
Well, could we say that if more than 5 people use the same form, it's a form? And
No,
if they didn't,
I think if one person uses it one time, it's a form.
okay.
Yeah, Margaret Griffiths, M.A. Griffiths, she wrote in both free verse and in received forms. And the way she put it was a free verse form a free verse poem finds its own form. So she believes strongly that every poem has a form. It's just, whether it's received or not. And that she wrote started out with a particular received form, and then she tweaked it and it became something. And she also felt strongly that the form is there as a tool. It's not, it's not like a, fill in the blanks and voila, you've got a sonnet. The sonnet form either serves the message or the mood of the poem, or else it's not really a sonnet.
See, I think what Julie's saying is true. It's just that the powwows are known as formalists, but what we really should be known, even though we write free verse and everything else, I think that what we really kind of specialize in is traditionalist prosody, received forms, like the sonnet or the villanelle, because there is such a thing as organic form, the kind of thing that Julie's talking about. But that's not generally the way that the powwows write.
I think we've made the free verses feel at home, though, and that's one thing that I'm very happy about in this group. We never suffered through the poetry wars because everybody.
Oh, what about the floor in the dining room?
What about the what?
What about what?
For the dining room.
We have another question. How and where do you all meet? We during the COVID, we met on Zoom, and we will resume meeting at the Newburyport Public Library, and we hope to keep a Zoom component. We need to make sure we have the technology. But we would love a harder. One of the things that, let me make believe that you asked this question, because this is one thing that I thought really helped us. And that is, what are some of the things that were part of making this anthology, bringing it to people? And we are very grateful to Alex for recommending to us that we seek out reviews so that people who are poets who are reading journals will learn about our book. And so we now we've now received 8 reviews, thanks to Alex prodding us to do that. And one of those reviews are actually Alex's outreach to Publishers Weekly. So we got reviewed by Publishers Weekly, and we're very grateful. Our most recent review is online on Poetry Porch. So you didn't ask it, but I answered the question. Would someone else like to know anything else? I'd like to say that Debbie Zabo said, Rhina, you're headed right for Poets Prison. Rhina doesn't read the chat, but she would love to know that. Thanks, Debbie.
By
So
the
what is
way,
it?
there's Debbie Sabo. If there is anybody left on the planet who doesn't know her, and I doubt that, she is merely the world's best leader of young people, young poets, ambitious young poets who are learning a mile a minute from her, because she is not only a magnificent teacher, she's also a marvelous poet who hides her poems under a bushel. I've been fighting with her for years. I want her to neglect everything else for a while now and begin to do what she should, to write her own poems, because I know them and they're wonderful. So.
So
Wonderful.
what,
Thank
can
you.
I ask a question?
Sure.
So what qualifies a person to be a member of the powwow?
Oh, that's a complicated question. Rhina, can you answer that?
Well, first of all, it's what Alfred Nicol said. You have to be a bit nuts, because well, the writing of poetry, the way we do it with this kind of devotion, requires that you sometimes forget everything else. As my late husband used to say, leaning on the door of the room where I used to do my writing, he used to say, "Are we having dinner in this house tonight?" So that it takes a little of that. It takes the ability to neglect everything else and forget that you're starving. But mostly it takes a love of the art itself and a desire to make it part of everybody's life. I think the thing that's special about the powwows is the fact that we're not only working for our own reputation, our own vast sum of money, which poets all make. We are also want to bring it back into daily life for everybody. We would like poetry to become a national habit. And I think that we've succeeded in that within the sphere in which we work. And fortunately, the young people who have joined us are just like that. They're nuts the same way as the old ones are. And they are wonderful poets, but they're also wonderful salesmen of poetry.
I will say, to extend the question that was directed at Rhina about membership, in the old days, this is about a 32-year-old group now. 31-year-old, 32-year-old group, and the group that Rhina founded before that in Queens is 50 years, I would say. And in most cases, Rhina's natural welcoming personality has just sort of ushered in people to join the table. But once the table gets too big, it seems like you have to consolidate into a methodology. So because in a 2 or 3 hour sitting, you can't consider more than, say, 16 or 18 poems with any kind of mind still on you by the 3rd hour. So that happened to the Fresh Meadows Poets, Rhina's first group, and it happened also to the powwows in the last, say, 5 years of having to provide a committee and a way to do the selection as room was made. And it's only been necessary when way fewer than 15 or 18 poets don't show up anymore, which is not very often. We are 30 right now. But I think I will also say that knowing Rhina over the years, I would say one of her 2 greatest ambitions that I've heard of constantly is that why can't Powow River poet groups happen all over the country? Just regionally, you're going to find so much poetic expression and so many people who are dying to come together over a large table at a public library that you can make it up as you go and make your own rules and decide if you're going to major in a certain kind of poetry or not. And what has to happen is simply a group of interested people and a decision to focus on the poem as a living thing and how to help someone improve that and not get into petty competitive or cross table pettiness. And if you can alleviate the pettiness and really focus on the growth of the poem or the improvement of the poem, we all go away with notes. I go away with notes sometimes and can't touch a poem for months afterwards because I'm filled with conflicting suggestions and ideas and periods or semicolons at that level, and also great metaphysical ideas about what I had in mind when I bring a poem that's not been understood at all. And it's a great process, and it's great to have that group of support around you. And I really encourage anyone, especially anyone operating in a vacuum by themselves, to think about ways to do that. And especially add young people if you can, because the more that's understood and can be passed on, the better. And then you can also impart where you should send poems, new places they don't know, and they'll know places you don't know. So there's a lot that can be done. And I would say the second thing, if I may also say, that Rhina is constantly impressed upon me, and she's started a table full of translators, many multilingual people sitting at one table, studying the art of how best to represent the sounds and ideas and words, but the music of the poetry they're considering getting from one language to another. That's another really important thing. That if Rhina and the Powow River Poets experience has any legacy, it's got to be those two things: more groups and more translators, really thinking the kind of thoughts that she's been teaching us for 30 years. 50 years if you count the Queen's groups. So she's talking now. She wants to talk over me, so I'll shut my mic.
No, I'm rude and I interrupt everybody, but what can I say? I'm an old lady. Old ladies can do everything they want. But at any rate, the other thing that's so important is to work on the poem, not the poet. You address the poem because that's what's really there. The collection is on paper. The poet is accidental. He just happens to have brought the paper with the poem in it. And I tell everybody, we don't attack the way the poem was written. We say the poem could have been better if. And it's never the poet who should have done something different. It's the poet. The poem itself is what you speak to. And I think that keeps all the bitterness that I've seen many groups ruined by completely. I've seen in New York a lot of groups that have died because there've been so many body punches, and people hurt. But on the other hand, at the other extreme, you don't say, oh, that's very nice, because that's useless, absolutely useless. You do pick what needs work. You do pick it. You say, you said that already in the first stanza. You don't need it in the second. And if you have established a sense of kinship in the group, if you've managed to not hurt anybody and still tell the truth, everybody will be happy with that. And the group will last forever.
Yes, and the only thing I can add to that is that make sure you meet on a regular basis. Deadlines help an awful lot of people write poems. And so then you'll have your group and people can get there and you can go out for lunch after or breakfast before, or you can make it work. Well, we are thrilled with all of your ideas and your input and your support. And we are grateful to Alex for hosting this session.
There are people
Yes?
still wanting to ask questions, so let more people.
They are.
Yes.
Okay.
Barbara.
Siam Karami. Is that-
Siam.
I have a couple of little things to add. One is that, respectfully, Rhina, I might disagree that we don't say this poem could be better if. I think that's rare. I think we say things like, if this were mine, or perhaps, or you might think about.
Yeah.
I think we're all very good at couching our opinions on possible changing to show that we know it's not our poem. And we're just carefully suggesting from our own inner brain to theirs. And another thing I think might be worth mentioning is, as for what we are as a group, that there are a lot of formalists, traditional form writers, and some free versers. I think it's pretty uniform that we all value clarity. And to that extent, I think that helps the mission you said about poetry trying to reach a larger audience. I think we all know how frequent it is that you read a journal and you read a poem and you think by someone you don't know, maybe, and you have no idea what they're trying to get across, none. And I don't know about you, but that's when I turn the page. And I think that's really, really rare with our group. We strive to, and we recognize in each other, clear, honest, important communication.
That's true.
So those are my thoughts.
That's true.
Thank you, Barbara.
I think that the young people who have come from other countries have added a great deal. People like Anton, for instance, and like Joseph Reyes, they have brought something to it from another culture, and that is so important, to get out from under your own place, your own skin, get out from under your skin and under someone else's, and that they have enriched the group that way. So that gets us back to translation.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Paula, and everyone. It was such a beautiful, beautiful and inspiring reading. And also I'm inspired to try to find a group where I live in Orlando, Florida, in that area, because there really isn't anything going on in poetry there except with the university. So it might be useful. Also, I wanted to point out that I noticed something interesting, that it seemed like the villanelle as a form seems to be more very strikingly memorable, more when read aloud than when on the page. And I just kept hearing these villanelles, like, for example, with Michael Cohen, it was like, wow, it just packed a punch. But also all of the forms, I think form as a method of writing, and I'm talking about received forms, seems to have more power when read than a lot of free verse. That's just my opinion after hearing this reading. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and hearing me out, and best to all of you. Thank you. And more of these. We need more readings of these kind. So somebody like me who's something of a nobody can actually participate and become a somebody. Even one-on-one.
Everybody is somebody. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, but you know, there are
You sound like Emily Dickinson.
You know.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
I want to say something in defense of free verse, which is funny because I hardly ever write it, but I love it when it works. I love it when free verse comes to me because it means that my gray cells are not completely dead yet. That I can still think something new and try something new, and it's so important to do that. That's why I'm so glad that we've had people in the group who have brought all sorts of new things. Yes. And we make a point of trying those new things. If you think you don't like free verse, read Stanley Kunitz. You will change your mind.
Free verse. I used to write only free verse. I didn't even know. But I found that when I reviewed my free verse, it seemed to me I was writing them in iambic pentameter without really realizing it. So I went and sonetized everything, and it really made them much better poems than they were as free verse for me. You know, it helps to strain my verbosity a little bit. Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm honored that people are listening to me.
I think there's some people who are raising their hands. I'm one of them.
Okay, please talk because we can't see we can't see the hands.
Oh, okay.
Please.
Well, I'm pleased to have been invited to this event, and to make things quick, I'm looking for an editor. I have a work that's coming up, my second book, and it's both prose and sonnets. The prose is an introduction, and there are notes to go with the sonnet. I know that's heuristic because poets don't usually join their verse with notes, but I think when you read it, you'll understand why. So anyway, I've had editors before, and I've enjoyed the process, and I'm looking for someone who's scholarly and has experience and skill. Do we have any volunteers, or could anybody point me to somebody?
Well, there's Alex Peppel, of course.
Yes,
He's right here, and
We'll
as
talk to
far as
Alex.
I'm
Well,
concerned,
write me, Anna, and I'll give you some suggestions. Do write
I mean,
me.
I would pay for it. It's not that I want somebody, I'm sorry, I always pay my editors.
Well, I'll give you suggestions to people who can help you.
another way to choose an editor is to go to a bookstore and look through the books and see the ones that strike you as handsomely put together. And you can also tell by the nature of the poetry that each publisher seems to like also. If somebody dislikes what you write by its very nature, then it doesn't pay. But you know, there are people.
That's true, and subject matter. Somebody may be affected by the subject matter I'm fascinated with.
So it pays to look through books published by different people and get a kind of clue that way.
Thank you. All right, I'll take my little hand off.
Thank you.
Any other person?
I just wanted to make a comment that I can lower my hand now. One of the things that I find to be characteristic of the Powow River Poets group is often in your work, especially in the anthology, as I'm reading the poem, when I get to the end, it's pretty clear to me that some key element of this poem was discovered by the poet in the process of writing the poem. And you know, it wasn't that, oh, they had this idea and it was versified. It was that there's a playfulness in the process that led to something new and exciting. And I really value that in the Powow River Poets that I read. Thank you.
That is such a great thing to hear. Such a great thing to hear.
Well said.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. As Rhina so often says, the poem writes itself, and the poet is holding the pen.
Exactly.
We think we're big cheeses, but we're not. We're just standing around.
Any other comments or questions?
I'll ask a question if I can.
Rick.
The biggest challenge in any art is balancing the objective and the subjective. And I'm wondering how you do that in a critique environment. Do you try to avoid like the sort of voice of authoritative consensus on the poem? You must do that. How do you manage to do that, especially when as often happens, and I've been involved in different groups, there's very often someone who's like the alpha critic who kind of emerges as very influential on, you know, what's working, what's not working. Is this something that almost has to be policed? I mean, how do you keep that sort of the subjectivity thriving in the discussion?
Well, I'll speak to that. That's a great question, Rick. And I think the answer to it is that there are enough strong people in Powow that there'll be a split second after some alpha critic, whatever, somebody might speak up strongly, a split second of silence, and then someone will say, I disagree, and then give another a slant to that previous opinion. So that I know exactly how that can happen. I've been in different kinds of groups where it does, but I think in ours, there's enough disparity and there's enough chutzpah that we speak up even when we disagree, or maybe most of all when we disagree.
Yes, exactly.
So you do try to avoid that what I call the, you know, authoritative consensus, that you know, you leave it open.
Well, we don't reprimand anybody, but I think, as I say, it just happens that somebody might launch in and say, this one doesn't make sense, or this one doesn't seem like a poem to me, or whatever. And that'll sit for a split second, and then someone will disagree and say positive things about it. And then from there, we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm talking about is the group's consensus at the end. So
Rick, there is no consensus whatsoever. All
That's
the
good. That's what I'm
feedback
asking.
to the
Yeah.
poet, all the feedback to the poet is by individual
Yeah.
poets at the workshop, and it's the poet's poem.
Right. That's actually a mistake.
That's a great thing. That's a great thing because we have people who temperamentally are different and they look for different things. We have people who, for example, who say, but that isn't logical. And we know that's Midge. That's Midge's voice. That isn't logical. This doesn't hang together. And when she does that, it's worth looking at your poem again because she's generally right. And then there's the language maven like David Berman, and he's the one who reminds us that we have to respect the language, that we can't play games with it unless we are doing something with those games on purpose. Every one of us has a slightly different thing. Some of us are ear poets. I hear it. I don't worry as much about the logic of it as Midge does, but it has to sing. So we're all looking for slightly different things. And I think it makes everybody else more aware of those things.
And I guess to some extent, it's the responsibility of the poet not to come away feeling that, you know, the group has judged the poem as working or not working. And they're getting input from different angles and different types of expertise. So that's the work that they have to do as a member of.
That's right.
I'd like to tell you a funny story. A funny story in regard to what you just said, Rick. One time, Deborah Warren brought a poem. Deborah Warren brings poems in process, and they're not as great as they are in her published books. Well, we trashed this one. There really was basically a consensus. This one's not very good. And she said,
I wish I was there.
She said at the end of it, she said, oh, I wish I'd known this before it got accepted at the Paris Review.
There you go.
Could I just add in a brief comment to Rick, what you were saying? A few years ago, I had the good fortune to be accepted into the New York State Writers Institute. And it was a 2-week summer program. And the rule is that you had to just sit and listen to what everyone had to say. You made notes and you were not allowed the opportunity to explain what you meant, because if you needed to explain it, there's no point. You did not succeed. So since that experience, whenever I'm being critiqued, not criticized, critiqued, I just make copious notes and say thank you to the group, and then go home and figure out what I agree with, what I disagree with, and I just forge on. I don't have to reply to anything, so I hope that helps.
This reminds me of an anecdote about a great poet that some of us know named Ray Pospisil. Does anybody know Ray? He died about 12 years ago. I first met him as my managing editor as a journalist, and he'd have a question on my story, and I tried to explain to him, well, he said, don't tell me. And it took me a long time to figure out that the reader, you're not the reader, you've got the poem's got you've got to go back to work on the story or the poem, one being art, the other being usually a pot boiler.
Anton, there's a question for you in the chat. Can you take a look and answer?
I'm not seeing.
Yeah, it was me who asked you the question, Anton.
My internet connection is unstable, but can I ask Anton a question? Doing, the Poets Read here tonight, write the first drafts in another language, in English, then write the final draft in English. I was wondering around the Rothkis Journal in Russian as well as in English. Yeah, there was a trial. No, I used to write in Russian until I was like in my early 20s, and then I just like switched over completely. Living in the United States, I didn't grow up in Moscow. So no, none of the poems for many, many years. I actually translate some of my English language poems back into Russian, and sometimes I need the help with that because I'm too close to them. So it's like, I sometimes ask other people to do it. So no, I mean, so far as I know, I don't think there are any.
Rhina has done it. Rhina has done it on several occasions.
Yeah.
Written in Spanish and then brought it into English.
Then translated into English, yeah.
Is handwriting another language?
Of course it is. You do it with music.
Isn't
Anton, you once told me you didn't like Brodsky's translations of his poetry. I mean,
Well,
to what extent do you think that it's best that, since it's translation, not to translate it yourself?
in a way, yeah. I mean, they've grown on me to some extent, but I think there is a problem of him being a little bit too close to the original and trying to imitate it in English that sometimes feels very unnatural to me. It's like it doesn't flow in English. It is grammatically correct. It is very erudite, but sometimes it feels a little like this is a Russian voice talking in English. So yeah, sometimes I feel like other people's translations of Brodsky are better. Although, I mean, not to say that he has no good translations of his own poems into English, but yeah, there is some of them. And again, the reason that sometimes I ask people to translate my poems into Russian, even though I speak Russian.
I really loved your villanelle and all the work tonight. Thank you very much. It was very clear. But your work, Anton, reminded me of the Russian poet Ilya Kaminsky. His collection Deaf Republic is very clear and unusual for Faber and Faber in London to publish a book with such clear and such clarity, so that when you read it you can understand it. But thank you very much, everybody. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Being here.
Do we have any other questions? This has been a wonderful discussion. One of the things I was going to comment on for Rick's question is, I think it was Rick Mullen's question about responses. One of the ways we actually have, now that we've been on Zoom, we have all had the opportunity to see the poems we're all submitting for workshop in advance. So we're preparing our feedback before we arrive actually in the room. Whereas when we were live before, none of us had ever seen the other poet's poem. And so the responses are what you see right away with the first reading. And that's different ways of approaching a poem. I like both ways. It's you get interesting feedback both ways. So you can think about that if in your group, if you want to try different ways of actually having the critique, whether it's on a first read or whether you're giving them a couple days to actually read and reread and absorb the poem.
May I mention a technique that was used by a dear old friend of mine, the late Richard Moore, in his poetry exchange. He would always start with a poem by someone else who was not in the group, a poem by, a time-honored poem, which I think set a pattern for addressing the poem and not the poet. I've thought it was really, really worthwhile. Yeah.
Good idea. Yeah. What you've just said reminds me of how important it is, if you're going to, for those of you who are thinking of starting a group somewhere, how important it is to have people who are willing to work. Not only willing, but eager to work. We have people like Paulette, for instance, who had not edited before and who just ate this job. She just bit into it and chewed it up and did it. And it was beautifully done. And we have Zara Rab now, who is the one who receives the poems from all of us and types them up and sends them back out so that everybody has a little booklet of poems before the Zoom begins. We have such hardworking people who are so devoted. Nobody says, oh, I'm too busy. Everybody works. That helps a lot.
And another thing that happens in the powwows is those powwows with experience are very willing to share their experience and help people who've never done something before to be able to do it. Like Rhina and Alfred and Jean.
When are you going to write another book, Rick Mullen? I need another book from you.
Thursday. Thank you, Rhina. That's quite wonderful to hear from you. I don't, they just show up unannounced,
Really?
And then
Maybe you
thanks.
put a bowl of milk or something on the doorstep. Maybe it'll bring them more often because
No.
I love everything you've written. I enjoy so much. It's always so unexpected. The one you did about the travels of what's his name?
Voyage of the Beagle.
Yes, that's right. Marvelous,
Yes.
marvelous book.
Thanks. That's how I came to terms with Darwin. I feel better about Darwin after spending about a year with him.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel that poets have visited you, that you think you're writing by yourself, but there's really somebody over your left shoulder? Emily Dickinson shows up in my house all the time.
I paint as well. I have that experience with painting more than with poetry, I think. Weirdly, it's probably beat poets that come close to doing that. And what I write is nothing close to what I would call comparable to beat poetry.
I like the beats.
Yeah, it's a spontaneous, it's like the spontaneous response,
Yes.
which I guess is what I go for in a painting, but yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. This has been wonderful. Thank you, Alex, for making this happen and inviting us, and for all of you participating. Oh, you gave so much to the program, to the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulette. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. It was
Thank
a
you.
wonderful event. And I hope you go get a copy of the anthology for yourself and enjoy even more of those great poems you'll find in there.
It's a real
Or
beauty.
for a friend.
Yes, yes, yes. And you can read them again and again, again and again and again.
I'm still trying to decide which ones I'm going to steal first.
Thanks a lot, everyone. You guys are great.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you,
for
Alex.
coming.
Thank you, all our readers.
Thank
Yes.
you all. I hope to
Thank
see you at
you.
our next event.
Go home and write
Yes.
poems now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Marianne. Tony.
Thank you, Paulette.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Paulette. Finally.
Thank you, Marianne. Such a wonderful reading. It was wonderful. I wish I could take home all these comments. Everyone made some wonderful comments. Thank you. Athar? Athar?
And,
Thank you.
I guess I'll just close the session and
Okay.
thank you all. Thank you, Athar,
Okay.
for showing up.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.